Housekeeping items. Everyone will be on mute. If you have any questions, please use the chat. In fact, feel free to say hi there now. Maybe where you're from. I'm in Phoenix, and what you hope to learn today. This session is valid for 1 hour of PDU. You will receive a link at the end before the end of the week. The key is you need to stick through to the end of today's session. Let me introduce you to our experts. First, we have Steve West. For more than 2 decades, Steve has helped thousands of organizations make their work life easier through project management as the founder and CEO of Project Insight. Project Insight is an award-winning project management online tool. Our mission is to automate your work, unify your data, and make your life easier. If you're not currently a member of our tribe, reach out. We would love to work with you. With Steve, we have Diane Buckley-Alwies. She has more than 3 decades of project management experience throughout multiple industries. She's an accomplished author, a speaker, a volunteer, a consultant. We are very fortunate to be learning from you both. Hello and welcome.
Welcome there, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Hey, Steve.
Great.
So how is everybody doing today? How are you doing, Steve?
Doing great, and we're really excited to learn from you, as we always do, and definitely excited to talk about project charters. We've definitely seen a lot of these running our system. So
awesome. Well, welcome everybody, and we're looking forward to spending the next 5 sessions with you on going through the entire program of 5 keys to managing any project. Basically, this program is about if you studied the PMBOK guide and if you studied agile methodologies and things like that, there's so many tools that we can use, and what we call it as our tools in our tool belt to help us manage projects that we are working on. But what I've found over the years is that there's really 5 things that if you start with these 5 things, you have a good basis for success. And so we're going to cover each of the 5 things in each of these next 5 sessions over the next 5 months. And today we're going to start with the charter. And next session, we'll talk more about stakeholders. We'll get into scheduling. We'll talk about statusing, which probably is one of our favorite topics as project managers, right? And risks and issues is the last topic that we will cover. And if you really understand these 5 topics, these 5 keys well, and you execute on them well, you will have a high probability of success in your projects.
yeah, definitely.
So with this session, we're going to focus on charters. And charters really are the way that we explain our project and why it is important to our organization. I've seen a lot where, people understand like the scope of the project, but in addition to scope, what does success look like? You can identify things that are going to happen as part of the scope, but if you really take the time and you want to think about what would it look like when the project is done, how would your life be different, or how would the recipients of your project's lives be different? So really spending some time in identifying what success is. So we have our hour together here today. We'll take our time through it. We definitely want to encourage questions. We'd love to hear what any of you are doing in your own environments, and we'll share best practices in using Project Insight. So the first thing, we're not going to have you watch this video, but I think Matt's going to cut and paste this into your chat. But this particular video talks about a 2-hour building of a house. So how many people think that you can build a house in 2 hours? Steve, was your house built in 2 hours?
No.
I know. It's like
you can't even buy it in 2 hours.
No, you can't even buy it in 2 hours. But that and I encourage everybody to go look at it later because it's about a 15-minute video. But what it did is a group of individuals, a group of vendors and various trades said, if we plan this project the best we can plan it, can we actually build a house from the ground in 2 hours? And they actually did. It was a little more than 2 hours, but it is still 2 hours. They did everything from the foundation to the walls, to the roofing, to the doors, to the toilets to the carpet, to the landscaping, all in 2 hours. And when you, after you've gone through that, you say, how did they do that? How did they really do that? And really what it is they spent the time, they spent a lot of time planning, and they spent a lot of time talking about what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, what order things need to be done in, what it looks like when it's all at the end, and who is responsible for what. And that's basically what your charter is. And a lot of times we don't spend enough time on that charter to really articulate what it is we want to the project to the end result to be. And if you can define that well, if you can communicate that well to your team and your stakeholders and anybody that's working on the project, you tend to get a lot more buy-in and a lot more success. Any comments to that, Steve?
No, I agree with you. I mean, a lot of times we focus on just getting it done, right? But then
Jump right in, right?
if you don't identify, you can be done and then not have any idea what the benefits might have been, how you're going to run your project. There's a lot to project charters, and I think I would say that most people don't take the time to do it. They just
and a
go
lot of
right
times,
through the project.
well, and if you take into consideration a lot of the agile conversations we've been having over the last several months, agile's great, but you still need to do the same thing, right? You
Right.
need to take the time and say, what is it that I want to have done in the sprint, right? It's the same thing. It's like, what does done look like? How do I prove that I'm done? How do I make sure that people have their tasks and they understand what they're supposed to do? And it minimizes the amount of redirects or tangents that people get on. So the better you can put a charter together, the more effective people work together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through several components of a charter, have some conversation about that. And I apologize if my voice sounds funny. I've been fighting a cold. Hopefully I don't start coughing in the middle. But so we're going to go through the components of a charter. And, if there's any questions that you have, please put them into the chat and we can talk through those. So the first thing is the description. What is the description of the project? It's the what. We want to build a house.
Right.
And then, the justification, this is the part that I think a lot of people lose. We get the what, but we have to say why. Why is this important? Maybe I'm building a house for injured vet or something like that. Maybe I'm building Habitat for Humanity. They're building this house for a family of 5. What is it, that business justification? And if I take it to a more corporate kind of conversation, let's say I'm going to build a website. I'm going to build a website. What do we expect that website to do? Why are we building that website? Are we going to use it for lead generation? Or are we going to use it more for information for our current clients so that they have a place to go if they have questions or if they have issues? What is the purpose? Because I can sit here and I can brainstorm 400 reasons to build a website. What exactly are we trying to accomplish? And you probably don't have the budget to build a website for all 400 reasons, right?
Yeah. Well, I think also sometimes don't they sometimes call that like benefits realization, or isn't that part of the justification?
Yeah, I would absolutely put that into benefits realization, because it's like, what is the benefit when it's all said and done? What are the benefits we are expecting out of this?
Mm-hmm. And I think, wouldn't this also, like, a lot of times people have a hard time deciding which projects they should do. Building the charter before you begin, wouldn't that maybe also help people understand what they should be doing and prioritizing the concepts?
Yeah, well, so the business justification could be a new product that's going to bring, $10 million to the organization if we do it right.
Yeah.
So putting a charter together and having a good business justification is going to help you also select between projects.
Yeah. And we have a question out there from Nam Nguyen. It says, they're asking, would simply be getting paid be a good enough justification? What do you think about that?
Getting paid,
Yeah.
probably a little too vague.
Hmm.
What are we getting paid for? Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody's going to hand me $10 just to be there, okay, great.
Yeah.
But they're probably expecting something for that
Right.
payment.
But even I think, in that context, that's what we do all the time is we're doing projects for
Mhm.
clients all the time. And it's really maybe not for us, the benefit is really the client's benefit. So
Correct.
you still probably should talk to them if you're doing a project for somebody and trying to understand what it is you're going to do for them. Understanding what their benefits are is really what you're going to
Well,
put in your charter.
if somebody's going to pay you for something, there has to be a reason they're going to pay you.
Right.
Right. It's like
Mhm.
just getting paid is not necessarily the reason that
Mhm.
you want. There might be organizations that do that, but I mean, if you have choices and of things to work on, and I could be working on this one project that doesn't really provide any benefit to our customers, or I can work on a project that provides, a 50% ROI within 2 years.
Mhm.
So really trying to get to what that means and really define it. It sets that star, what's that North Star? Where are we going with this? Helps keep people directed on where we're going. Because if I'm just going to say, I'm just going to work on this project because they're paying me to do it,
Yeah. Well, I think if
what would it look like at the end?
yeah, and I think you just want to have that conversation with the clients. I think a lot of
Absolutely.
times they're hiring you because they already know what their realization is. But maybe if they don't convey that to you, you should ask and say, well, what are the justifications so that way you can inform your team. I get it that it helps maybe even inspire people to know that if your client's doing something that's got some goodwill,
Hmm.
your team, would be more motivated, even if you are the contractor and your entire team is a contractor. It helps to get them to be vested in what the client's objectives and benefits are going to be.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, Steve. Yeah, absolutely. Gets everybody aligned
Yep.
and everybody motivated on what we're trying to accomplish with this project.
Yep.
The third component are the major components. So we don't expect to know everything when you start a project, but there's probably some major components, major sub projects. Maybe there's some vendor deliverables that have to happen. Maybe there's a component that's going to be done by another team. But what are those major components? So if we take that house, there's probably a plumbing component. There's probably electrical component. There's a landscaping component.
Hmm.
There's a foundation component. What are those major components of that project? And you want to start identifying that, because what's really interesting, or what's really beneficial, in my opinion, on these charters is to identify what is included as well as what's not included. So if you don't take the time to think about what's included, you'll never know what's, in theory, excluded. And that's when you get like halfway through the project and your client says, well, I thought this was included. And you're
Right.
like, no, it wasn't. Well, if you didn't have it documented any place in time, who's to say that the client's wrong or you're wrong?
Yeah.
So it really helps to make sure that you're putting in that charter the major components. There's always going to be some gray area. There's always going to be some negotiation. You're not going to know everything up front, but you should take them a time to kind of think through those components and even identify the things that are not included.
Yeah, that's a really hard one, because everybody you want to make your customer happy, or you want to make your boss
Mhm.
happy, or, the business happy, whatever your situation is. Definitely figuring out what the scope of what you're trying to do and your deliverables, I think is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I mean, I have over my years many times had to go back to my charter, my statement of work, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
and point the client to it and say, I'd love to do that for you, but we didn't define that as a deliverable.
Right. Because you didn't
And then
estimate,
they're like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
But you can always add to it, but they just got to realize that it's not what you originally set out to do.
Correct.
Otherwise you get later on, they'll be like, well, why were you late? Or why did you go over budget? And then as a project manager, you're the one in a jam
Yep.
for that.
Yeah.
So.
And if you really want to make the tie-in, all those components need to be supporting that business case, that business justification as to why you're doing this. Mm-hmm. Right? So yep. They all have to relate to each other. Why would I do, let's just say a parking lot? Why would I put a parking lot in a house? So if the purpose is to build a house, then I shouldn't see parking lot as my major component, right? Driveway, but not parking lot. Very different thing. Yep. The next thing is, remember we were talking about what does it look like when it's done? How do I know when it's done? And you've heard the term, quantifiable versus qualifiable. This is where you want quantifiable objectives. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a second. But when it is done, it should be able to say, I accomplished this, I accomplished this, I accomplished this. So this is the part where I see a lot of organizations not do, that gets them in trouble, because they make it vague. Like, we want it to be user-friendly. A user-friendly system. Okay, what does that mean? That's a very subjective, qualifiable criteria. User-friendly could be meets the ADA rules for, hearing impaired. That's a lot more quantifiable, because there's very specific rules that you can go to and verify that. But just saying it's user-friendly is not. So proof is one thing that we'll definitely talk about a little bit more. The other thing is constraints. You will always know some constraints. It could be resource constraints. It could be environmental constraints. You're building the house in Utah and you're starting it in November. Well, you're going to have some constraints, right? Potentially weather constraints. So really taking the time to think through, because if you can identify the known constraints, known assumptions that are out there, it makes for an easier conversation with regard to what is going to be that timeline. If you have resource constraints and you need to have a certain qualification resource, and that person's not going to be available till June 1st to start the project, then you've got a constraint there. If you have some assumptions like, you're going to build everything in-house versus go and buy, you want to outline that, because all that makes a difference in the overall scope of the project. So taking some time to think about the constraints that you have today and the assumptions that you have today will put some limits on what you deliver. And then, the favorite one is always the risks, the gotchas. We know for a fact that, things are going to happen. I've never had a project where things, you didn't have some sort of little surprise. But what you don't want is big surprises. So, you should take a moment, maybe more than a moment, and really figure out what are those risks that can be applied to this project, and really understand, what's the chance of them happening. And we will talk about risks and issues in our session 5. So we'll get into a lot more detail on that, but it's really important to at least identify the ones that you know of today. Risks will change over time. And you'll have different risks today than you do 6 months from now. I did see one of my favorite topics of when we talk about risks, and which really puts in perspective that risks can change. If you've ever seen, the NASA, when they sent up the Mars rover the first time, when that Mars rover first landed on Mars, it was that big bubble of things, and that had to land, and then that had to deflate, and then the rover had to come out. And the program manager that was at NASA got on the press, being interviewed by the press, and his comment was, "We've retired a lot of risk today."
Right.
right? That means that's like brings it really up front. It's like the risk I have today won't be the risks I have tomorrow, but I need to plan for them as they come along. That's why risk management is something that really goes throughout the project, and you have to constantly be thinking about it. And the best project managers out there are the ones that are constantly thinking about what's happening today, where's my risk today, what can I do to help mitigate those, how can I get rid of them and make it better for my team to deliver on this project. So I know
Yeah,
I
yeah,
go ahead.
that's a great point you make about just thinking about it, not just when you're starting the project, but to continue to do risk management throughout the project.
Yeah,
Um,
it's super, super important. And too often we just think about it at one point in time and then put it away. And that's not the case. I mean, there's a many times when something will happen within the organization and I have to like think about the projects I'm working on. And I'm like, I probably need to go talk to this senior executive or this senior executive and get their input and, trying to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on to where we have a plan to manage those risks. So it's a constant conversation.
Definitely. And, it's funny because the types of risks that you have depend on the project. Like,
Mhm.
Project Insight, our project risks are that we might create a bug, that's
Right.
a constant risk always that we are dealing with every release every couple of weeks. But then just the other day, I was watching the Challenger explosion thing where,
Oh,
you know, it was cold and the vendor knew that their system had problems when it was cold and
cool.
they didn't manage their risk properly and then people lost their lives. So it's like
Correct.
depending on this of what you're trying to do, it can be really very important. I mean, a bug in software is just a nuisance because no one's going to be hurt or anything, but like if you're building an airplane or doing something that people use, like a car, even like
Mhm.
even bicycle, someone could get hurt. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, but our software bugs could also cause that too.
It depends
Yeah.
on if
Yeah.
project management software is down a little bit. It doesn't,
Yeah.
but I guess if you're making software for the healthcare industry, like a device,
Mhm.
yeah, it can be very important.
Yeah, so you really need to, and every project's going to be different and with the level of risk. So
Hmm.
again, trying
Yeah.
to get you to take a bit more time and really think through, why am I doing this project? How should I approach this project? What are the things I know about this project? What are the things I know about the environment? And put it in writing, because
Hmm.
I don't know about you, Steve, but I don't remember what I said a week ago,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right?
Well, you don't want to have to dig through your email, but I
Yeah.
think getting back to the charter itself is, we were going to have a whole series on risk and risk
Mhm.
matrices and all that other stuff. Like that can be more than just an hour just talking about that.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
when you're doing, my recommendation is if, when you're filling out your charter, at least just put your top high level things down right away. It doesn't have to be detailed because you are going to go deeper into that as you go into the project. So it's
Mhm.
like try not to be overwhelmed is really what I'm trying to say.
Agreed. Something in writing is better than nothing in writing,
Yeah.
you know. And so going back to if we go back to the first one, the objectives. So what I want to do is just spend a little bit of time on making sure people understand the concept of SMART objectives. And, this is where, if you identify the objectives of your project with utilizing these tools, the SMART tools, it'll be very easy to know whether or not you've succeeded at the end of the project or not. I've always asked people, I said, how many objectives should a project have? And, get answers like 10 or 5 or, you know, a handful. In my opinion, there should be no more than 3. You're never going to solve everything in one project, right? There's always going to be iterations that we want to do. Especially with agile, maybe it's just one objective, but that objective needs to be very specific, very measurable. Everybody has to agree to it, has to be realistic, and has to be time bound. That sprint. So these apply to, whether you're talking agile or waterfall. And if you can define it in those terms, at the end of that sprint, at the end of that project, it's really a yes or no question. Did we meet it? Did we not meet it? And it's very easy then to know whether or not you've succeeded. So if I say 3 objectives, if I have 10 objectives and 3 of them I don't succeed with, well, was the project successful? I don't know, because maybe these 3 were the most important ones we should have gotten. We only got these other 7. If I have 3 objectives, if I miss one, I'm probably going to say I didn't succeed because that's a third of the, potentially a third of the project. If I miss 2 of them, absolutely not succeeding. So really kind of manage the number of objectives down and make them as specific and measurable as you can. So let me give you a couple examples. So I can sit here and say, plant new landscaping. Well, is that specific enough? Right?
No.
If I say plant 10 palm trees on the north side of the house this weekend with pine bark mulch, way more specific. Given, time bound, I'm going to do it this weekend. I'm putting new palm trees and pine bark mulch on the north side of the building. So I'm not planning to do the whole building, my whole yard. I'm just planning new landscaping in one area, which is way more specific. And you can kind of step back over the weekend and say, did I do what I expected to do? It's either a yes or a no. Now I have a bathroom that has to be remodeled, and it's been having to be remodeled in a long time. But my husband and I were finally getting to the point where we're ready to pull the trigger on it, but there's a lot of work to do. And so we could say remodel the bathroom, but that's very vague too. Like what are you doing with it? So an option might be, I'm just going to replace the 20-year-old bathtub with a walk-in shower by the end of the year for less than $5,000. That's not what we're doing, by the way. But
you're probably going to spend way more than that.
Yeah. I think just the drilling the new hole for the toilet is going to be more than that.
And the risk there is that you'll slide the schedule out and add to it as you go.
Right. Budget as well. With that remodel.
Yeah, my husband and I have been spending probably 3 years talking about this remodel. So
yeah.
When we're ready to pull the trigger, we're going to know exactly what we're doing and exactly what we're spending. But, you can see there's, remodel the bathroom is pretty vague, although, maybe initially you didn't think it was.
Well, it's really just the name of the project, like that's not the charter and that's not the objective.
Not an objective, right?
Kind of the overall thing.
It's an initiative, remodel the bathroom or raise money for the new soccer equipment. Okay, what does that mean? We're going to organize a fundraiser over the next 4 months, time bound, and raise $2,500 for new soccer equipment for next season. Yeah. So that's getting a lot more. So we know what our goal is. We got a time bound in the next 4 months. Doesn't say how. It just says, we want to get $2,500 to be able to buy the soccer equipment for next year. Way more specific. Much easier to say yes or no at the end. And the last example is deliver 2 new products to market this year. In this particular case, that deliver 2 new products to market this year is that could be like anything, so I changed it up to launch 2 new restaurant concepts for breakfast in the Tampa market by the end of 2023. Still, that one's probably a little more vague, but at least it says it's a restaurant concept, not a new restaurant per se, by the end of 2023, giving you some parameters to work from. And then you build everything from there. And you might find that you have too great of risks or, too many constraints to be able to make that happen. And that brings up the point of is it okay to modify the charter? Is it okay to change the charter after you started the project? And what do you think the answer is, Steve?
Yes, of course.
Of course it's okay. Yeah. If things change, it's okay to go back and say, you know what, this assumption was not good. This constraint was bigger than we thought it was. These risks came up, so it's okay. And that's why I always like to see that charter in writing that you can go back to, and then you update it as things happen. So you have a record of what's been going on with the project.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And the thing is, you can actually have more than one charter per project as well. You could start with one and create a new version of one just to keep a
Yes,
track of what you changed, or
yes.
it's still it'd be the main one that your current one, but it's almost like you could baseline your charters.
No, I absolutely. I was like trying to think if you can have more than one. I would, but versions of those
Yeah,
charters, yes, you'll have an
definitely.
evolution of the charter that is definitely feasible. Because
Mhm.
have you ever had a project that you had to cancel?
Sure.
So that's the same thing. You get to a certain point and you say, you know what, this is not feasible. This is no longer going to bring us the ROI that we wanted. We're going to cancel it, and that's okay. So that's another reason why you want those charters documented. You want to make sure that everybody understands what those goals are, and that they can work with them. And it's not something to be hidden. It's something to be sharing with everybody on the project team that are stakeholders, especially your clients. And there's four last little pieces to the charter that I wanted to touch on, and then we're going to show you an example of charters within Project Insight. So not all projects need to procure things, but if there are, you should have your expectation of what you're procuring in your charter. You should also have who are the project team members, any key team members. That, remember, it could be one of those constraints of having certain types of skill sets, documented, and whatever is those constraints. Maybe it's even having the customer support for a period of time for them to do their testing. So they, like I work in a lot of financial services where April is tax season. So trying to get clients to do heavy testing in April is just not going to happen. So that is a constraint in many of our projects. We don't do as many implementations in the month of April as we do in other parts of the month, parts of the year, because of that. So being able to document those constraints and who you need on the project team. And then, basically identifying your project manager and the sponsors and who are those authority figures that are points of escalation if you need it, and who are the people that are authorized to initiate this project, which is usually your project manager.
Yeah.
So, we got what, 10 sections of a project charter that, in my opinion, you have to document them all, even if you have no procurement.
Well, I think the reason that you would maybe, obviously the project manager knows who the stakeholder is on a project, but when you have a big team, there might be individuals coming in that don't know who that is. So they would know if you use a charter and everyone knows where the charter is located at all times. If someone's curious, they can go help themselves and not have to ask the question.
And you bring up a
Um,
really good point, because there's probably people that are coming into the project
right.
later on.
Yeah.
That, wouldn't it be a nice little introduction, like they're coming into the project 3 months in,
Yeah.
to go through the project charter with them? They might need to be added into this section because now they're new to the project and they're critical stakeholders.
Definitely. And this is where I think doing this exercise is critical because as a project manager, writing it down and getting it into online even or something like
Mhm.
that can save you time, because if you don't have it written down and new players come in, then you end up spending your time verbalizing it to them, which is not a good use of your time. After just writing it lets a lot of people see what these pieces are, and if they know exactly where it is, they can go help themselves. So it's part of, to me, it's part of automation and automating what you do and
Agreed.
leveraging your time effectively.
Agreed. Agreed.
Prevents those
And more,
questions.
and just like when you write something, the first time you write it, maybe it didn't come out the right way, but as more
Yeah,
people put eyes on it, you have the opportunity to clarify it. And it just brings to the forefront the conversation to make sure
yeah,
everybody understand.
yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like if you're not doing this exercise, especially on these larger projects that have a lot of going on,
Moving parts. Hmm.
you end up regurgitating your charter verbally all the time. So the goal is to get it written down, put in place, so that you're not having to spend that extra time doing that,
Absolutely.
talking all the time.
And as I said earlier, I don't remember what I said last week.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm
It is a
probably,
challenge.
and the reality is if I'm repeating myself 6 times, I'm going to leave things out in subsequent times because I feel like I've already said them. So it's just human nature, you
Mhm.
know. So it's just not communicating verbally is not the best way to ensure, because and then we don't hear it well.
Mhm.
We don't hear everything because we're multitasking, right, Steve?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, before we get into the project insight, we just talk a little bit about stakeholders. Just to make sure that you take into consideration all the people that are stakeholders and you think through all the people that are stakeholders. Um, it's who's impacted by this project.
Yeah.
So it could be your own organization, it could be yourself, it could be a customer, it could be another department, so the project team, so there's a lot of different people that could be stakeholders for your project. So it's really important to kind of think through that, because when issues do happen, when risks do get triggered, you may have to go back to those stakeholders. Same thing we were just saying. Make
Yeah.
sure you have it in one place and you know who they are and
Yeah.
who do you need to go back to. Your project team are they going to be the people that going to get the work done, but they are also stakeholders. And there might be some experts, there might be some experts in your organization that you need to consult in certain cases, and take the time to kind of brainstorm it. Who are they, and document it.
Mhm.
Any questions by the broader group here, Steve?
We haven't seen any new questions, but I
Okay.
definitely think that figuring out who your stakeholders are is a good exercise to do. It's something, again, like people just skip over that a lot, or it's just assumed
Or it's just the
everybody
common.
knows.
It's not
Yeah,
just common.
everybody knows who the stakeholders are. There's always the obvious ones, and then there's the not so obvious ones.
Mhm.
And that's who you really want to get written down so that when you do need to communicate, you include them.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Or you
So,
you get to use an automated system, right, where you can have all their sign off and everything can just happen all in one shot, where you can go in and document this guiding principle for everybody, one instance, and have it go to everybody who needs to have access, right?
right. Right. No, there's all different ways to handle it, but you have to know who they are. Right.
yeah.
So I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and Steve's going to talk about some capabilities within Project Insight.
Well, yeah. So, Project Insight, obviously, it's a tool. So, having a tool doesn't mean you actually, what we're talking about today is more process than tool. You can make a project charter in Word or other formats, but we also just want to show that it is something you can do in Project Insight, especially for those of you who are customers of ours. Um, what's really great about the way we do it here with Project Insight, and we've is you can use whatever fields and labels you want. We gave you a great example, or Diane is giving you a great example. Definitely go through and make sure you cover each of those areas. In this example, I have just basically left a box for the background and critical success factors and benefits realization, and then all of the things that we're talking about, governance structure of your project, how your project's running, any assumptions, your constraints and dependencies. These fields I just kind of uh, are basic, but we have clients that take this kind of form and put a lot more granular information. And then we have some clients that do just the three things that the 9 things that we talked about today. So you can do it any way you want. But what's great about putting it in line, like we talked about earlier, is that everyone knows you can just come to the project charter from just
Mm-hmm.
another view here. And then you can report on these across your whole entire portfolio. So you can compare backgrounds of 2 different charters, or you can compare benefits realization of 2 different charters as well. So just wanted to show that, having a tool really helps you because you can automate getting that information relayed to everybody. But that's not going to, just having a tool doesn't make you actually do the exercise. So today it's really important to talk more about the process of doing the charter and making sure you have one, and then having a tool to put it in is a benefit. But even if you don't have a tool, make sure you put it into, Microsoft Word or Google Sheets or Google
But I'll give a shout
word
out
processing.
though. I'll give a shout out because I would, having it in a tool like Project Insight and then being able to
Yeah.
automatically have it part of a reporting mechanism. So as you're giving status and reminding people, I mean, we've all seen the little, red, yellow, green status, reports and stuff that
Right.
say, what's the status of my project? But to constantly keep it top of mind, what those, what
Right.
that justification for that project is, and that helps us in the conversation when we start talking about, hey, this risk happened. This is what we're doing about it. We're considering it's high probability because it's going to impact our objectives and meeting our objectives. So it just really helps in that conversation and not having to go people into like SharePoint sites or Google Drive and go find it somewhere. It's awesome to have it in a place that you're managing your project from.
I mean, basically here I'm showing now a task. So if a person like Patrick Insight assigned this task, they click on it to see the task and they're looking, they're working on it, but doing the normal things they do on a task. If they know, okay, the charter is always right in the views, boom, here I go to the charter. Then that's how you can make this easy for them. So
I
everyone
just thought
knows
of
where it's at.
something, this is like ad hoc conversation, but if we put, our 1 to 3 objectives or in each a little section, like objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, you can even tie those to the various tasks.
Definitely. Yeah.
So if somebody's task applies to this objective versus the other two, you can link that and say, how do they impact the overall success of this project? That's the other thing. A lot of people don't understand how their task in their project really impacts the success of an overall project because we haven't tied that task to a measurable objective to the overall goal.
Right. So anyway, yeah, definitely something to consider, putting it into whatever project management tool you have. If they have Project Charter as an option, go in there. One of the things about our tool as well is you can make more than just the charter. You can make other kinds of forms as well. Any kind of form you need can be made. And then they're, like I said before, they're configurable. Not everybody's organization fits into the same charter questions and structure. So we see them all the time. They're most of the time they share the same concepts like what we were talking about today, but sometimes a client wants to get more detail about what their goals are, or maybe they need to put more emphasis on risk because they're doing things like for healthcare or whatever. So that's what we make sure that whatever tool you put it in. Word is obviously the most flexible. The bad thing about that is you can't report on it very easily and across your whole organization. So that's the benefit of automating some of that. Okay, but we can move on now.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Well, now we're ready for a wrap up. So, if there aren't any other questions about the charter, anything else out there?
Anybody have any questions?
There was don't see any new questions from the audience today.
All right. Well, thank you for attending today about talking about the charter. Like we said, there's going to be five sessions. We're going to talk about stakeholders next and really help define who those stakeholders are. And there are very different kinds of stakeholders out there and how do you manage them? And then scheduling, we'll spend a lot of time on scheduling, status reporting, and of course, risks and issues. So we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming months to talk about all 5 keys to managing a successful project.
Yeah. And I did get a question earlier prior to this particular webinar, just for everyone's benefit. Some people asked, hey, if I can't meet on the webinar live, because we have a lot of people that watch it kind of after the fact or just a little bit delayed, we do allow you to still earn the PDU for a short period of time. But it can't, we're not allowed to have it be more than about a day or so. So if you can't watch the webinar live, you definitely can still see it right after on YouTube and still get access to your PDU. It's just that after about a day, we take the PDU out. And do you have a late question coming in here?
Oh, great.
So the questions are, so for the sections that were red, yellow, and green are sections for the charter. I think, Diane, do you want to answer that? Because
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. I was
well,
coughing.
they're asking if you use the color for a reason, and I don't
Oh no.
really think so.
No, that was not for a particular
Yeah.
reason. I did mention red, yellow, green charts. That's just that's just the typical stoplight kind of chart
Yeah.
of whether or not the project is green.
Yeah,
and everything
usually
is
that's usually for the status of the project is where people use those. But in our tool, you can use colors any way you want as well. We do have a lot of clients that use colors for project phases or set of colors for phases and then a set of colors for statuses. But it looked nicer that she put the colors in the PowerPoint, so there was no direct connection.
It's all good.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, that answers that question. But definitely go out there, and if you don't know what your charter should look like, there's lots of examples out there too of building charters, like templates that you can use to construct them if you don't have one for your organization. And obviously we have some in our tool as well, but you may want to even look for an industry specific example to follow.
And don't forget to watch that YouTube video. It's awesome video.
Oh, the video at the beginning where they build the house. Yeah, definitely gonna check. I haven't actually seen it myself, but I would plan on checking it out.
Puts a lot of things in perspective.
Someone wrote, or there's a follow-on question to the answer. I mean more that those categories delineated by the colors. Yeah, I think if you want to use the colors to delineate the categories, you should. You can do that. I like in this form earlier that I was showing, and let me pull it right back up. I didn't spend a lot of time building the form, but in this case, I did use this like grouping here and in the form to say, here's the high level and then the goals and the project governance together. So you could put a color on something like that too. So if it does help you fill out the sections, definitely do that if that's something you want to do. But it's not necessary to color code them.
And we can help you get the exact template that Diane used into Project Insight to make that happen, right? Just please reach out directly and we'll get that to you. We're going to be showing our QR code at the end of the video as far as the PDU is concerned as well.
It should be up on the screen now.
There we go.
Yeah, there it is.
And we appreciate everybody being on today with us. Please follow us on social, and thank you so much.
Okay, great. Yeah, these are the upcoming webinars. Like we said before, stakeholders next. We already went over that. Stakeholders, schedule, status reporting, risks and issues. These are the next 4 after this one for this whole series of running your projects in a more formal way or a better way.
And then
okay,
so great to have you guys all here, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
We'll see you for the next 4 sessions. Actually, we're really excited to have everybody on. So,
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.